The Australian Football League, or the AFL, is the premier spectator sport of Australia. It is exciting, skillful, tough, and is played by some of the fittest athletes in the world. The sport averages crowds of over 35,000 for each game. AFL has been played for over 150 years at the highest level. The sport is played with an oval ball, much like an NFL, football, or a rugby. The goal of the game is to move the ball forward and score. The only ways you can move the ball forwards is by running, by bouncing the ball, using your fist to hit it forward, and of course the most common way is to kick the ball. Once in scoring position, the aim is to score by kicking the ball between the two goalposts, which are set between each end of the ground, where a goal is worth 6 points, and kicking it between the small post and the big post is called a behind and worth 1 point. Between those goals is 155 metres of straight grass wide and 110 metres long, bigger than any sports oval you've seen before. The game is played professionally between 18 teams in the AFL, with 22 players on each team, 18 on the ground but 4 on the bench, where each team plays 23 home and away games to compete for Australia's Super Bowl, the grand final. Although this is such an iconic, true Australian sport, and there's little attention outside the border, so the question has always stayed in my head: why isn't the game international? In today's video, we'll be unveiling ways on how the popularity of AFL in Australia can be expanded internationally. AFL has been around for 160 plus years, and it was first played internationally when an English team toured Australia in 1888. But what is the international awareness at the moment? Leagues are played all over the world. The most popular countries that AFL is played in are countries such as China, India, Japan, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Europe, Canada, and USA. More than 180,000 people now play the sport around the world, and 44% of them being women for a game that is usually considered as a man's sport. Many of the 180,000 people are involved in the inaugural International Cup between amateur national football teams from around the world. The event is held every 3 years but was postponed in 2020 due to COVID-19. The Cup involves 12 national teams and is planned to be played on the Sunshine Coast in July to August 2021. The closest related game to AFL is international rules, a sporting link between two cultures on opposite ends of the globe. The concept is a mixture between Aussie rules and Gaelic football rules. Rivalry began in 1984 between Ireland's national sport of Gaelic football and Australia's national sport of Aussie rules. Although the game wasn't as popular between 1999 and mid-2010s, it is still a spectator-drawing event, where each nationality's most skilled players compete in a 3-game series. The AFL have a number of international broadcast partners who shows games in overseas countries. These include partnerships through many places around the world. So overall, the game is fairly known and played overseas. But are the AFL actually looking to move the game? What is the AFL's current policy? Many people have opinions, including Hawthorn president Jeff Kennett, which blasted the concept of playing AFL matches overseas, stating, "It's an absolute waste of time and money." Port Adelaide's chief representative in China, Tony Zhang, says that the China experiment, where Port Adelaide have played a game in Shanghai once a year since 2017, where they made around $500,000 from commercial activities. Although these comments have been publicly made by AFL clubs, what have the AFL actually said about trying to get the traditional game overseas? The answer? Nothing directly. As mentioned before, Port Adelaide pushed for games overseas, but mostly due to financial gain. Other clubs like Gold Coast and St Kilda being involved with the games in China. A GWS Giant spokesperson told The Australian, in quotations, The AFL has pursued an expansion agenda across Australia. With initiatives like the Shanghai Game, there's clearly an intent to take the game to an international audience. Based off this quotation, some clubs like the idea of playing games internationally.
However, more was said throughout an AFL-X launch. McLaughlin gave the answer that proved the AFL were attempting to move the game, well, a form of the game overseas, stating, in quotations, "We have had trouble taking our game internationally. This is not our traditional game, AFL-X, but it's got all the best bits of it. The evidence given now proves that the AFL have the mindset of increasing overseas popularity. There is no specific policy, but the AFL are seeking to build an international bond for Australia's national sport. This displays that they aren't confident with the traditional game being as iconic over the seas." More about AFL-X will be mentioned later on in the video. So now that poses the question, how can the popularity of AFL in Australia be expanded internationally? The points below will be potential ways that AFL could expose the game. The first one being social media and TV. Social media is a massive part of today's society. Enough that some people's lives are built off and based around. Social media is also one of the main ways trends and news are spread around the world. Could this have a key role in spreading the popularity internationally? With no sports being played live due to COVID-19, countries like America have nothing. However, Aussie Rules is being played in Australia. The AFL gained some exposure in the US in March, when the opening round of the season continued despite most leagues across the globe already shutting down. One fan in particular who's creating awareness on his own accord is former NFL punter, sports analyst and podcaster Pat McAfee. When he first found the game, he told everyone he could. He posted tweets on his Twitter, videos on his YouTube channel, with each gaining hundreds of thousands of views. Before McAfee watched Aussie Rules, he believed it was rugby and not a completely different sport, showing that even professional athletes don't even know what the game is. However, does all this affect the expansion of the game? Yes, all the international viewers from McAfee's podcast and tweets all positively influence the awareness of the game. Due to all these new American viewers, McAfee's quick affection and others, this has given the AFL the ability to broadcast games on ESPN and Fox for the rest of the season. A total of 34 AFL games across 17 weeks will be showcased on the US network, as well as finals, with commentary and graphics to come from the host broadcaster. AFL-X. The introduction of AFL-X also supports the reasoning that the AFL want to branch out overseas. If you don't know what AFL-X is, it is pretty much a condensed version of footy, aimed at exhibiting the league's best players in a format much like the cricket T20 format, but a rectangular field. The introduction of 10-minute halves and 7-a-side teams suggests that the AFL are trying to get a form that overseas viewers can relate to or play with friends easily. For example, potentially the most distinct disadvantage to promoting AFL overseas is that rarely any overseas countries have sporting fields the same size of an oval. Perhaps cricket or track and field is an exception, but what other sports do? The answer is not many, and the AFL's current answer is rectangular oval. AFL Chief Executive Gillan McLaughlin admitted this on an AFL-X launch. In quotations, the facility challenge was the original issue or the original part of the creation of this concept. Playing overseas. A potential solution is to play games internationally, but to do that, you have to make people aware of it first. Without proper advertisement like signs, billboards, TV ads, broadcasting, and knowledge of the game, there is really not much of a point in going into such measures in the first place. A potential option may be playing in populated areas that don't really have a recognised sport if you're looking for the growth of the sport. For example, look at India, a fairly poor economically country that cricket has grown in to make corporations like the IPL multi-billion dollar competitions. However, the one thing that the AFL are indicating is that if it's a risk and if it has any chance that will be a bust of income, then there is no way they will take that. Now that the US have been given an understanding of the sport due to COVID and the increased broadcast, then they would be a reliable option. In saying so, the only way this will become possible is if the AFL and clubs agree to play games in the US. One way of this becoming possible is the financial benefit with the sponsorships and memberships that will grow if the game becomes an international phenomenon. As evident from David Koch's statement, according to Port Adelaide players Boyd Woodcock and Jared Lena that were interviewed, with increased awareness of the game, the AFL will draw in those extra sponsorships, much like what Port Adelaide have done with China, where they received 2 major sponsorships as a direct result. The Power unveiling a $3 million sponsorship deal amongst a list of 20 sponsors. Concluding my research, my opinion on the question is that it won't be an internationally loved game, at least not anytime soon. Really, the only way to see the AFL accelerating forward quickly is by playing live games over the border. Throughout everything that it takes to prepare such events will cost the AFL too much money for the high risk, high reward type nature around the whole operation. Until the popularity between countries grow, there isn't much of a point in taking those chances as of now. Constraint of grounds particularly being a key reason to why it won't be internationally played. As highlighted earlier on in the video, AFL X could be a way to get around this blockade. So in this sense, the modified version of the game is the way to go if the AFL wants to spread that form of the game as soon as possible. However, the form wasn't popular in Australia at all, so there is that chance of putting a bad sense behind Aussie rules as a whole if that fails. In that case, I can't really see the AFL following this path. So what is a way of expanding the popularity overseas? As boring as the answer, time. It is the key. As long as the AFL keep pushing for occasional games around the world and continuing to post regular Instagram, YouTube and other entertaining posts on their social media platforms along with international broadcasts, the viewers newly gained have a way of keeping in touch whilst games are progressively getting recognised internationally. As much as I would love to see this game being spoken about all around the world, even as a young man, that still seems like too much to ask for as of now.